Hi everyone, Talky Talk Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Vane album, Errorzone. This is the debut full-length album from Boston, Massachusetts band Vane. They formed in 2013 and have built up to the release of this debut full-length record with a series of EPs, and I personally was pretty hyped for this new record of theirs because I thought a lot of the teaser tracks to this thing pretty fire. Frantic, vicious metalcore music in the vein of Converge or Botch, or just generally some mid-2000s metalcore, but with kind of a weirdly electronic edge, like maybe some drum and bass elements being worked in there or something. It seemed like oddly futuristic, post-cyber mathcore or something. Upon deeper listens to the album, though, this record is not quite as ahead of the curve as I thought it would be. However, there is a wider array of loud rock styles going into this thing than I thought there would be initially, because not only are there characteristics of metalcore and very intricate mathcore on this record too, but also like some industrial music, some alternative metal and new metal in the vein of like a Deftones or a Slipknot. I would say that there might even be a touch of groove metal on this record too. Maybe the band is a little into Fear Factory. Even though there are numerous subgenres going into this album, it's all blended pretty seamlessly into a violent flurry of throat-shredding screams, very groovy and jagged guitar riffs, very grimy, distorted bass, fairly flashy drumming, and plenty of breakdowns too. All of this is enhanced pretty subtly with some clean vocal passages every now and again to kind of make things a tad more melodic. I hear a lot of attempts on this record to kind of elevate these very harsh and occasionally basic alt metal and metalcore sounds. But now that I've heard the entirety of this record, I sit here wondering if Vane truly has gone far enough in that respect. Because the overall sound and aesthetic of this record, it's kind of average. The guitar tone, the vocal style. For metalcore music, it's kind of dime a dozen. To the point where if you handed this album over to a less experienced listener, they might assume that this is just some kind of old metalcore record from the mid-2000s, because it kind of sounds like it is, even with the little bit of anachronistic genre blending that Vane does. Because while I can hear that they are trying, like, their approach to these harsh music styles is nowhere near as inventive as, let's say, a band like Code Orange. I mean, transitional moments on this record like Anesthesia and Untitled actually do more to bring diversity to the track list than a lot of the core songs of this album do, like Old Data in a Dead Machine. Tracks like the intro Virus Vibrance are actually incredibly freaky, a supreme highlight on here, as is the closing song on here, Quitting Infinity, which features these really eerie and epic sci-fi style guitar passages. But throughout the middle of this record, it's almost like the band intentionally tones the experimentation and their sound down to blend into much of what has already happened in alternative metal and metalcore. Upon closer inspection, a lot of the tracks on this thing aren't really wowing me, even if many of them are delivered in these very aggressive, straightforward, and to the point 1 to 2 minute attacks. There are longer moments on this album like Doom Tech, which clocks in at a very beefy 4:46, but a lot of the clean and moany vocal passages on that cut are kinda drab. I would like to say Vane takes a slightly more tasteful approach when it comes to copying over these elements of guitar and clean vocals straight from nu metal music, but it's not really that much different. It still kind of sounds just like it did a decade ago when many of these artists were kind of creatively driving these sounds into the ground. I can really only see the slightly different approach Vane is taking to it if I tilt my head, squint my eyes, and just shake my head violently, especially when it comes to the very edgy and melodramatic finish of Doom Tech, Every Time I Close My Eyes, or the kind of moody piano passages that carry away underneath blaring guitars toward the latter half of the song End Eternal, which are barely audible, don't really add that much to the mix. I mean, I can't entirely knock the album. There are some good musical highlights on here. It is a pretty tight, groovy, abrasive, somewhat fun listen. It's 20 minutes and change. It doesn't stick around that long. It's blunt. It's kind of eccentric at points. There is a baseline of good things going on this album, but so little of what's delivered is actually great and stand out. Because a lot of the ideas that the band is reappropriating are just sort of stale at this point, and they do very little to reinvent them. However, the recording and the execution for the most part is really good, and I still kind of chalk a lot of the issues with this record up to this being the band's first release. I still hear a lot of good things on here, and clearly they are trying to do something at least a little different. I hear that they're on a similarly experimental trajectory like that of a band such as Code Orange. So who knows where they'll be 3 years from now, what their next album is going to sound like. Maybe it will be more experimental, maybe it will be more adventurous. I guess I'm just going to cross my fingers here and hope that that's the case, and hope that these guys eventually become an exciting new face in the metalcore genre, because Jesus Christ, the genre needs it. I'm feeling a decent 2 strong 6 on this thing. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like, please subscribe, and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. And yeah, that's it. That's it. Anthony Fantano, Vane, Errorzone. Forever.